In this lecture, we are going to create a dynamic page by rendering the current time. Not the most impressive example, but it will demonstrate why developers favor React over plain JavaScript. First things first, let's update our solution by storing the elements inside a function instead of a variable. In most cases, it's considered good practice to return elements from a function without using a variable. There are various reasons why. One reason is to prevent memory leaks from occurring. Memory leaks are considered a massive problem in programming. They can cause a user's machine to act sluggishly. The idea of a memory leak is simple. Whenever defining a variable, we occupy memory on a user's machine. Variables are not free. Similar to storing items in a warehouse has a maximum storage capacity. The same idea applies to variables. If a variable is not needed anymore, we should clear it from memory. This action will allow us to store other variables. Take the following example. This example is not fully functional. However, let's pretend that it is. In this example, we are creating a login form. Before rendering the form, we are checking if the user is logged in with a conditional statement. If they aren't, we'll render the form. Otherwise, the form should be hidden. This solution works, but it's not ideal. Even though the form will never appear on the page if the user is logged in, the element for creating the form is stored in the user's memory. It never gets cleared. We're occupying memory that doesn't need to be copied. Function definitions will occupy memory. However, the element for creating a form is not occupying a user's memory. It isn't until the function has been executed will the form be created. Unlike the previous solution, a memory leak has been avoided. Let's convert our variable to a function. First, let's create a function called page. Next, move the div variable into the function. Let's replace the variable name with a return statement. Lastly, we can update the render function by calling the page function. This function should replace the div variable. After making those changes, the app should continue to be functional. However, we're using a function instead of a variable. Let's start creating dynamic content. Our goal is to display the current time like a clock. JavaScript has an object for working with dates. This object has various functions for grabbing the current time. Let's display the time in the h1 tag. We can inject the time by using a template literal. First, we should convert the third argument to a template literal. At the end of the string, we're going to add a placeholder. Inside this placeholder, write the following code: date.toLocale string. The date function is defined by the JavaScript language. It's automatically available to us. This function will return an object with various functions for grabbing the current date. We can grab the current hour, seconds, month, or time zone. It's loaded with information. In this example, we're grabbing the current time by calling the toLocaleString function. If we were to look at the page, the time gets displayed. So far, so good. It would be cool if the time was updated every second. Luckily, JavaScript has a function for executing a code block with an interval. Below the render function, let's run a function called setInterval. The setInterval function is defined by the JavaScript language. It's a special function for executing another function on an interval. It has two arguments. The first argument is a function. This can be a regular function or arrow function. Let's pass in a regular function. This type of argument is new to us. However, it's completely valid to pass in a function to a function. The second argument is a timer. We can create a custom interval. The interval is measured in milliseconds. Let's pass in 1000. Our function will run every second. If we want to update the timer on the page, we should move the render function to inside the interval function. Basically, we're rendering the page every second. Seems like a waste, but wait until you see what happens. On the page, the timer gets rendered every second. We've simulated a clock. However, there's something else happening behind the scenes. It's possible to assume that the entire page is being repainted. That's not true. Check this out. I'm going to attempt to select the time on the page. Whenever the timer updates, the browser will deselect the text. It doesn't matter how many times I try. The text will always be deselected after 1 second. This behavior is part of the browser. If an element changes while being selected, the browser will deselect the text. What if I select the text in the paragraph elements? Nothing happens. The browser will not deselect the text from the paragraphs. Under the hood, React can intelligently update the page. If an element does not need to be updated, it'll remain intact. React understands that we're only changing the current time. Therefore, it'll update the heading. The other elements will remain untouched. For this reason, developers love React. Normally, we would need to manage this behavior. Without React, we would need to keep track of our elements along with the values inserted into the document. One solution would be to use IDs. However, we would need to assign an ID to every element. This can quickly become a nightmare. React is more than capable of tracking our elements without additional help. The team for React have developed an efficient and optimized algorithm for properly updating the document. This saves us time from creating a solution ourselves. It allows us to focus on the UI of an element. Hopefully, it's starting to become clear as to why React is awesome. In the next lecture, let's tackle the problem with scaling an application.